it does sometimes feel like we're at the whims of white people's guilt, and that can be frustrating. But I want to mostly say this to the Black entrepreneurs who are listening and putting out content. Like, I don't get discouraged. It's really more about where we are in our social cultural moment. And I find when it comes to Black voices, sometimes we're loved and adored, and our perspective is seen as necessary. I try to remind myself that like the world is so fickle in how it feels about Blackness and Black voices and Black contributions. But as long as we can maintain that perspective on ourselves, that our voices are worthwhile and our contributions are worthwhile. Welcome to Right There With You, where we lean into life's biggest questions, challenge what we think we know, and discover the strength we've had all along.
This is my friend and co-host, Ciarra Jones, theologian and lifelong explorer of faith, identity, and purpose.
And say hello to my co-host and buddy, Cass Cooper, a professional chaos whisperer who loves untangling the complexities of human relationships.
Here we embrace the journey, no matter how uncertainty or transformative it gets.
And no matter where you are on yours, we're right there with you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pod. What's going on, Ciarra?
What's going on? What is
What's
going
on?
I am in New York. The energy is good. The vibes are immaculate. So no complaints over here. It's good stuff.
I am so excited. I'm going to New York next month, and I'm so excited.
I know, you're going to be staying.
I know. I'm going to be staying at your lady's apartment, which is so generous of her. I'm so excited. It just worked out so great. The conference I'm speaking at is literally a 15-minute walk from her apartment, which is great. Listen,
It's gorgeous.
it's a testimony to like great community and just people really trying to help you build things and being open to saying yes when you ask, hey, I know you may not be there, but can I stay at yours?
That's what friendship is. What community, and you would do the same. Cass has literally housed me before.
I love it.
I think you get back what you give as well. Like you are very generous in friendship and community. So
I love it. Thank you. This season, we're all talking about Black women and work and what that looks like. Unfortunately, we live in a world of capitalism where we all must work. And it's very rare to have independent wealth, especially, insert in this economy type situation. And you recently made a TikTok about Auntie Brené, as I like to call her. And I am not a Brené defender or apologist.
I would not be upset.
But I think, why don't we hit with like what your take was or is, and then we can kind of like talk through my very nuanced disagreement. But go ahead.
Yes, let's do it. I don't know. I don't know Cass's disagreement yet, so I can't disagree with her disagreement.
I love it. It's like, because normally we come in like super prepped, and now I'm like, I just put in the comments, y'all, like, we might have to talk about this a little bit more, friend.
Yes. I think, so I want to nuance it as well and say there's so many things that are great about Brené Brown's work. I don't really I'm not someone that just like shoots down someone's work or scholarship like willy-nilly, nor do I think it's okay to just blanket someone's scholarship in one way. So I like her work on shame. I love her work on bravery. I do not like her work on courage and vulnerability. And for me, that's because something that Tracy McMillan Cotton says in her book, Thick, that I love is that like Black women deal with being made to be structurally incompetent, meaning there are structures that simply don't serve us. We could think about healthcare or education or the workplace. There's something broken structurally that harms Black women. Like one of those theories is pet to threat, the idea that Black women actually become punished and are seen as threatening the more competent they are. Because for Black women, achievement and success in the workplace isn't just about skill set. It's about how your dominant group member colleague might feel about your success and how their feelings of insecurity in relationship to your success might mean you're not promoted, not because you're not good enough, but because of what it means to them if a Black woman is promoted above them, what it means to them about themselves if a Black woman achieves. So I think that I love that Brené Brown talks so much about vulnerability being a strength and naming our emotions as a strength, which I think is important for Black women and our work around grief and well-being, because we do get a lot of autoimmune conditions. I think part of that is because we are silenced in society. But I don't like the framework of vulnerability that I think puts a lot of onus on the person to name their need and not the structure to be safe to receive that naming of need. And I think that I have been in workplaces where I've attempted to be vulnerable, but it's misconstrued as anger or it's misconstrued as being difficult. But I'm just suffering. And I think with Black folks, we deal with this added layer of our vulnerability being misconstrued as violence. And I just don't know if her framework got there. And you can challenge and say maybe the framework didn't need to get there, but that's my issue. It's a very nuanced critique of it. It's definitely not just like it all sucks, but I have an issue with that framing missing.
Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying. There's such a lack of structural, and that's mainly my thing when it comes to just organizational frameworks in general. It's the world of work is not structured to for people. It's not. We are there to be cogs in a wheel to keep this mechanism going and
Yeah.
going and going, at the detriment of us as individuals. And I think like we can definitely see where there's a disproportionate impact on different communities of vulnerability, right? Like we are locked in when it comes to that. I think the thing about Brene Brown's work in general is and I think this goes with anybody who has like a longevity of academic scholarship, is sometimes it depends on at what point you as an individual are introduced to their work. I think people who have read her stuff like in the order that it comes out get a different perspective if you just take like a one-off book. And
Mhm.
so I came to her work from Dare to Lead was the first book that I read of hers.
Mine was Daring Greatly and Gifts of Imperfection. Those are the 2.
So this is why I say that, because she had those books come out first, and I think at the time, it was very clear that those books are written for white women by a white woman who has a very specific University of Texas-based scholarship, right? Like, we gotta, like, paint her in the context that she, is and owns herself. I think the thing for me is because I came to it from Dare to Lead, which is talking about how you as a leader can structurally like impact the way that your teams are, my perspective on her is different because I see her coming from a structural framework rather than a individual one, right?
Mhm,
And so in
mhm,
Dare to Lead, now she doesn't mention race. She talks about her and her team and the things that they do in order to make things organizationally better. And it really does come from the premise of as a leader, it's always your fault. And it's your job to train people, to empower people, and to help make the system better for the people that work for you, to create boundaries and guidelines that help the organization as well as help your people. And I think that honestly, I think this is the best. Like, I've never read Daring Greatly, and I don't feel like
mhm.
I need to because I get that like kind of vibe from like her videos and stuff like that. But in the gifts of imperfection, but I think like Dare to Lead, she does address it, but not in a very specified racial way. And I think when we come to this like critique of her, I think that it's easier to critique the lack of intersectionality because of her earlier work, if that's where your point of entry is. I will say for me, I was not introduced to her from a uh organizational development mindset. Like she came to me through my couples therapist, was like, sister, I think you need to work on vulnerability. Watch this YouTube video type shit. And I was like, I don't need to work on vulnerability. I know how to be like, I'm like, why would I want to do that? And to the same point of the world is not safe for me as a Black woman to be vulnerable. And I don't want to do that. Right. And his point was, well, if you can't be vulnerable at home, then you're never going to be able to like grow and lead that. And I think that is something, and it was for both me and my ex-husband to like work on together.
Mhm, mhm.
So from that standpoint, I think that she's really great. Again, I'm not a Brene Brown apologist because I think like fast forward to Atlas of the Heart, which I've also read, and then I don't know, did you watch that Netflix special that she did? Or maybe it was on
I watched parts of it. 2 I think I watched 2 episodes. I don't know how long it was, but I did.
Okay, so I think now she's at the point where her celebrity is so big that one, her message has become redundant and reductive, and two, the nuance, it's like she's forced into addressing nuance when she's actually really just not well versed with the ability to do so, which is where we get her work with Tiana Burke, right? Like, and so what I find interesting about the Brene Brown arc is also a generational thing because I think women who are older, like I'm in my 40s, who have really been culturally pushed to be white identified in the workplace find her work to be very fulfilling and rewarding, even as women of color, because we've been taught to be white women at work. Like that is, and which is what it's weird to think about,
What do you
which
mean
we
by
can
that?
so, in order to be successful in a corporate environment, you need to be like devoid of your racial existence, right? The straight hair, the lighter skinned you are, the even like dressing kind of more with like colors and, like the African print. Like I wore an African print dress to a sales conference like probably a decade ago. And my boss was like, I really like your dress, but I don't think it's appropriate for this environment. Right. And I'm like, but this is how I dress, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, having that be outwardly stated is something that is very much, but it goes back to your point of it's very much ingrained in us. It's having that outwardly stated is very much ingrained in us from a generational level. And I'm talking like elder millennials to like Gen X, maybe even baby boomers a little bit. And so her work speaks to that generation because the idea of intersectionality at work for Black women is like not a thing for those of us who are like, I would say 42 plus. It's just not a thing. It exists, but it's
Mhm.
not something that we have been culturally encouraged to strive against. And
Mm.
what I love though about your critique is the encouragement to look at it from these older folks, these old heads are telling us to be more vulnerable, but have not done anything to create an environment where that is okay. And that is where we can agree because I
Mhm.
feel like that is our responsibility as the elder folks and the elder leaders in the room is to
Mhm.
make the world better for the folks that are coming behind us and the folks that we're leading. What is the point if you're not going to leave it better than you found it? Listen, I wouldn't even go so far as don't read Daring Greatly and what is the other one? Wilderness, whatever.
I haven't read the book. Like I said, I love Gifts of Imperfection. That was the first
Gifts
text.
of Imperfection, right?
I thought it was phenomenal. When I think about I see almost Gifts of Imperfection as a theological text almost. Like Gifts of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Imperfection.
Wait, wait. Say it again as a
Oh, I was
theological text.
Gifts of Imperfection Gifts of Imperfection is almost, in my opinion, theological. It's more
Really?
about
Okay.
how we've learned to process guilt and shame, uses of guilt and shame in our lives, and like what. And I think it's actually a really profound text when it comes to deconstruction. I think around 2010, between like 2010 and 2012, I was deep in deconstruction, like really dipping my toes into leaving evangelicalism. So I think I like her frameworks on shame.
Yeah.
I have a response to other things you're saying, but I want to.
Yeah. So I say all that to say what I get a challenge with is like the overall discourse of throwing it's almost like that throwing out the whole body of work. And I think when we look at the evolution of people and writers and theorists, we've got to take into account the time that they were writing, the it's just like we do when we decenter the Bible, right? Like we got to take into account the time that they're writing, the audience that they're writing to, the audience that they're coming from, and also their celebrity. I think a big part of her is like her celebrity has gotten so big that there's this expectation. Like, I think she has a new book that's coming out, which I'll be interested to see how it's marketed, right? And who it's marketed to. And even if she addresses the racial critiques that she's gotten. So yeah, I just, word saladed a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh,
But I think like my
there's a group of women, probably older millennials who like have really resonated with her work. I have more thoughts, but please, please.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, and even like my mentor, like we call her Auntie Brené because I feel like she speaks to a very specific niche. And this also begs the question of as, theorists get older and move further and further away, either by choice or celebrity or their cultural, whatever things that happen, like who comes in to fill that void? Like, what does that look like? And how can we culturally do our own work to create new things that could speak to that same level of vulnerability and the structure of it. But I think
Mm,
that's also where like Black women like ourselves come in because we are living the intersections and filling the voids of the things that she doesn't speak about.
yeah, I love that. And I think, like I said, I think there is a huge subset of folks who have been deeply moved by her work. And I think even the internet hates nuance, but in my critique, I definitely did not say that all of her work was bad or frame all of her work
You
as
did
bad.
it.
I just said I
I
don't.
was actually kind of half teasing you because I'm like, Fram.
Well, like, really don't like her work on vulnerability, but again, there's other things that I do love, but I think what's interesting is, which I feel like has been, like, largely erased from the memory of the internet is Brené Brown got eaten up for her comments on Palestine. Like, when Palestine started, eaten up. You can go look on TikTok, you will find viral video after viral video critiquing what people felt was a really middle ground stance on what has been happening in Palestine. And I think some of that is a result of work that is steeped in empathy culture, but sometimes empathy culture isn't always intersectional. And I think we as a society are really drawn towards empathy culture because it sounds good. Like we have empathy for all communities and we feel for all people. And there just can be things that are lost in that framework and that
Say
framing. And
more. When you say empathy culture, what do you mean? Because I'm
like,
not sure I follow.
yeah, like, so for example, like, do you see the recent issue with Joey Swoll? You know Joey Swoll? He does like Joey Swoll is I'm gonna bring it back to Brené Brown, but Joey
Okay,
Swoll
yeah, yeah.
is a really big creator as well online.
Listen, y'all, I am not like well versed in what the young folks is talking about.
That's
So if
that's
I
okay.
sound old right now, I apologize.
No, no, it's not. It's
I
all
try to
good.
be cool, but I ain't that cool. But go
No,
ahead.
he's very cool. But Joey Swoll is big on the internet. Some folks will know him, some folks won't. And he was bringing kindness into the gyms. He would like film people, like he would like get things that were sent to him of people being unkind in the gym and say, "This is not good behavior. Be compassionate. Be kind. Don't judge people because of their bodies." Blah blah. And then recently, something happened where his video kind of led to harm happening to a black woman, and it really led to he thought that he was doing the work of empathy, but he also kind of like sicked his creators on another like black woman. I don't think he was thinking about what it meant for him as a white man to call out this black woman or how it would impact her. And then when people called him out, he was like, that's what, no, he got in trouble because, well, I think that did happen, but he got in trouble because he was talking about like forgiving Hulk Hogan for his like past after, I think because Hulk Hogan died. Did Hulk Hogan die?
Yeah, Hulk Hogan
Yeah.
died.
So I think when he died, like a lot of the stuff around his racist past came up. That's what it was. And then Joey was like, well,
As it happens when
I've
people
connected with Hulk Hogan before, like we need to forgive him. And that led to a big conversation of like, okay, like you have this kind of blanketed kindness and compassion for folks, but you're not thinking about who maybe has harmed certain members of communities that you don't identify with. And then in response, he was like, well, I know colored people feel a way. Everyone was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it really unearthed that he had this culture of empathy he was trying to create, but lacked an intersectional understanding of what that meant, what his own empowerment as a white man, how he could still create harm, even though he thought he was acting within this culture of empathy, and how empathy for Hulk Hogan might actually feel like an erasure of harm Hulk Hogan had done to marginalized communities. And I think when Brené Brown had made her statement on Palestine, that came up of like feeling like there's a lot of both sidesism here. And is this empathy for all actually creating empathy for none or creating harm because you're not acknowledging maybe a larger history of subjugation for Palestinian communities? And so I name all that to say, like, right now, because I made this critique, I think it seems like a unique critique of Brené Brown, but there's been a larger feeling in different waves of critique, I think, from other Black women and women of color around this. And when I did my follow-up video, mostly what I said is what I love actually about Brené Brown is she highlights her research design on her website. So you can look at exactly how many participants, the demographic, her design and clothing
rare. 'Cause a
style.
lot of these books come out and we just get the data and we don't get the methodology, we don't get the background, we don't even know like the length of the study or whatever. And we just say, like, this is truth. Like
Yes.
we can't and any that's the thing about social science research. It it should be able to stand up to some critique. And I should also be able to see like, okay, well, here's the holes where you missed, or made an assumption about a group or whatever that looks like. I do appreciate that about her too.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and because of that, I could look at how she designed her study. One thing she did say is that, like, she coded identity as it emerged in the data, and something I just wonder sometimes for white scholars is, are you catching all the nuances of identity as it emerges? Like, I work on a team right now of researchers, and we do well-being research for an organization, and we actually match the race of the researcher to a focus group because, for example, like, I used to do their Latina focus group, but we got concerned that as a black person, maybe as a researcher, they weren't telling me all of their experience because I'm not matched. So now I do our African American focus group. Our Asian identified researcher does our Asian American focus group. Our new Latina identified researcher will do a Latina focus group because there is something that happens when researchers have the cultural competency to understand everything that's emerging. Like whenever I do research with black employees, they'll mention things like they'll subtly call themselves DEI hires. And I'll say, why did you use that language for yourself? And all of a sudden we're drilling into blackness and professionalism. And so I think something that I just wonder as Brené Brown has done her research on vulnerability, and though she coded it as it emerged, I wonder, did you miss something as a white researcher? What was the demographic of your research team? And also, can we look at vulnerability if we didn't include in the methodology an idea of structural vulnerability? Who was already made vulnerable? And I think something I've said in my video, let me see, because I know she defined vulnerability, and I was like, this is the issue I had. So I want to bring it up.
Bring it up, friend. I also and then I want to double click on this like idea of empathy again because I do think that
Yeah, let's bring it back.
Empathy is such what's the word? I don't wanna say religiously coded, but it's such a quagmire of, like, who is doing the empathizing, and for whom are we expecting empathy, are my 2 questions, but yeah.
Well, I mean, even it came up like empathy is gendered and racialized heavily. Like think about like Bill Cosby, P. Diddy, R. Kelly. Even in the black community, you have this idea of we need to give patriarchal men with power empathy because to critique them is to push our community backwards. Because to critique them means that we're not celebrating when men in our community are successful despite their behavior. So I just think, and I talk about this in the church, like empathy for cheating ass husbands, empathy for trifling ass pastors who forgiveness is a political act in itself, I think, but
Or who people are expected to give empathy
yeah,
to. But also, I question those of us who are expected to be more empathetic, right?
yes,
Like,
absolutely.
because then that leads to increased victimization of, you know, we're empathizing with the fallen, husband and who, stepped outside their marriage. But what about like their children or their partner and wife or like whatever that looks like? And where's the empathy for them? To
Yeah,
me, then it borders on like pity. Like,
yeah,
just feel so bad for her. I couldn't even, and it's like, no, I empathize with her because like I see her,
mm,
or who's expected to be the like there's this expectation that like black women in any context are supposed to be empathetic,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And not hold people accountable for their bad behavior. And I think that
Absolutely, yeah,
that to me is like,
yeah,
what?
yeah. I agree. Imma come back to that. I
Okay,
was
yeah.
gonna say the last thing she does, like, in her work, she defines vulnerability, and this was my biggest critique was as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And my only critique was black and brown, disabled, queer people actually already live under uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So just can we include that in the framework? Like that's literally my only critique. And I think, like I said, like even for black women and women of color, we do see in the data that our personality and our affect can be misread. Our sadness can be read as anger, or our pleading for support can be read as weakness. And even in the work I do with one-on-one black women clients, when I say like I know this is going off with your manager. I want you to address it. They'll be like, well, what if I address it and I'm more isolated? And so I think just really making sure that we are just creating some space where the onus isn't only on the individual. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you said that she did that in her earlier work. So maybe it's just drawing that through line.
No,
And
it's her later work. That's right. So, yeah, so Dare to Lead came out after her first 2, but I also and this is and honestly, I can maybe this is also my bias because I think when because sometimes we read our bias into the text, and I think when I read Atlas of the Heart, she does talk about how anger actually is a mask for sadness,
mhm,
and how and I saw that again, could be
mhm,
my bias reading into the text. I saw like understanding those multiple layers of emotion allows us as the feeler and the perceiver to know more about what people could be feeling and experiencing because we have better language to describe what they're actually like going through. And so again, but honestly, who has the time to read every single text from every single author? Like
actually
nobody has.
sounds like you did read most of her text. Whatever. It actually sounds like you literally have read all her text.
Nerd alert.
That's okay, like, I wanna highlight, like, I never am critiquing to critique for no reason, and I think that,
Correct.
like, ultimately, like, if like, there's so many folks that love Brené Brown, and if it's a and for folks that are listening, if that is a framework that works well for you, I think that's wonderful. I think around the work that I wanna do around Black women in the workplace, I don't use it because I just don't want to put I find that women in my age group, maybe 25 to 35, the work doesn't land in the same way it does maybe with other professional women, and it feels like the onus is being put on them without there really being structural accountability. That's
Yeah.
just how I see it, but it doesn't discount the uses of the work. And
And
this
I think
conversation is good because it shows, like, maybe you wanna continue to use it and I don't wanna use it, and that's great.
oh, honey, I use it for my own personal stuff, but I
Yeah.
don't use it when I'm talking on stage. I feel like but I think that that is also a strategy for myself because
Mhm.
I want to platform women who don't like Brené Brown doesn't need my help. She does not
Mm.
need our help to be
Mhm.
more platformed and to think for people to go and find and seek out her work,
Yeah.
right? There's other theorists who speak in the same kind of area. I'm thinking of Minda Harts or I talk
That's
a lot in the tech space. So Ruha Benjamin, like those women to me are doing amazing work around leadership and racial harm and technology and all those things that when I go and speak in front of an audience, because I know that they are already familiar with this one, I'm gonna platform this one.
yeah.
But I also think I do see how, like we said before, it is some of it is a generational thing. It just is, and I think that that is why this is why we need to continue the work because, like, it's all stepping stones to making these conversations more visible.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think some of it too comes from like one thing that I am very sad about, but I think anti-intellectualism, I see it in online discourse so much more clearly now because again, like I said, her methodology is online to go look at and to critique and to
God, it's
engage
sad people
with.
don't know how to read a methodology.
Well, I'm saying like, but I think like it's such a failure because it does mean that I think it's limited our ability socially to critique people, to nuance those critiques. And I do think it's really interesting, like having spent a lot of my career in academia because a lot of Black scholars take issue with a lot of her frameworks. Like, a lot of scholars, very prominent scholars, African American studies, for about over a decade I've talked about it in my coursework and on Twitter, and I mentioned Dr. Carrie Yazid, her work on courage culture is interesting, and she often uses Angel Reese now as her modern day example of why she doesn't believe or believe in courage culture and feels that, like, watching Angel Reese try to she talks a lot about watching Angel Reese try to advocate for herself and be misconstrued as angrier and angrier as she's done that advocacy, and she's used that, as a stepping stone to really think about critiquing courage culture and vulnerability, but I think ultimately, like I said, there's wonderful work that Brené Brown has done. I don't always believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but there's one thing I will say, which is white scholars always get the gift of being seen within the context of their time, but there was always a Black scholar in their same time ahead of them, always. Like, we always do this for white scholars, like,
Real.
in the context of your time. And then there's a Black woman, Patricia O'Collins wrote Black feminist thought, I think in the 90s. So I think that is my one critique is why do white women get to be in the context of time, but Black women get to be in the future? You know, and like I think this book, Black feminist thought, 1990, I think is saying things that we don't see said in white scholarship, now. I feel the same way about slavery and slave narratives. They'll be like, well, like slavery was a product of the time. Really? Because Black people were writing prolific texts in 1619 about why the hell this is racist. So whose construct of time?
And that's you are spot on when it comes to that. It's almost as if there's multiple timelines happening at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like and what's so interesting to me about this is why I'm doing my series on like some of y'all have never been encouraged to read Black women scholarship and it shows because it
Yes.
does show like like all of this is already there. Even the critiques of I would bet money that had Brene Brown really gone into and had a true conversation with Angela Davis's text on Palestine and Black liberation, she would not have got caught up probably in that scam.
Yeah.
Because Angela Davis has been saying that since the 80s, the 1980s, bro. She has been saying that the struggles in Palestine and the struggles, in the United States are parallel. The woman went to jail and international community in the 70s was advocating for her and saying, and so it's like, okay, here we are 30, 40, 50 years later and we're having the same conversations. It really just goes back to y'all need to listen to Black women. That's really what it comes back to. I don't even know. I don't even say anything else. Just listen to Black women and stop and get out our way.
No, but I think also like why I like this conversation. It's probably the first time we've like maybe disagreed or just had a different angle on something. And I really like it. Like I think that it reminds us that Black women, we are not monolithic. How we feel about certain theories and applications in the workplace differ. And I think like we've kind of lost the art, I think, of wrestling with something in public together, and like I want to say I really appreciate that. I appreciate pushback. I
Yeah.
appreciate talking it through. And I do think we are such an either or society, which is a product of white supremacy, but when it comes to Brené Brown's work and other critiques, it's not either or. It's what is a nuance that is happening here. Again, we can acknowledge her great work in Dare to Lead and her acknowledgement. You're right that she has always said, "Leaders, it is your fault," which I think is profound in the world of workplaces. And it makes me wonder too, why have people like Mean to Hearts or Lovey, even Tressie McMillan Cotton has had some really great critiques of the workplace. I'd love to see them get the same type of recognition on that level, you
Yeah,
know?
but we know why that is.
Of course we do, but I'm saying like
Okay.
but also I do think some of it is and again, like, we can talk about whether this is good or bad, but the palatability of that theory, and I think Brené Brown I should think about this a little bit more, but I do feel like sometimes maybe she operates within values that just feel very legible to American society, like I said, like underlying
Well,
value.
that's what I mean, like, when you sit when we say, like, her scholarship is based at the University of Texas, that tells you a lot about
Yeah, Bible.
where her scholarship can go. I mean, it is the major research institution in the state, let alone, like, a big publishing house. Like, there's a lot of powerful alumni that have come out of there, like, there's a lot of and so I think, you just get access to different mechanisms. I also think it points to, like, the difference in, like, in the race points to the same thing we're talking about of, she can come out and weather the storm of these critiques because she has institutional protections that Black authors of the same caliber are just not able to have. I mean, how many times do we see Black scholars get their funding cut out from under them because they have a little bit of a controversy? I mean, I'm thinking of Ibrahim Kendi
Mm,
and
mm.
the whole thing of he had some, a
That
little
lab.
bit his lab the anti-racism lab and stuff, and what's interesting, he had a critique of some of the fundraising and stuff, quiet as it's kept. Those critiques quietly went away. They, did a full investigation, and there was no misuse or mishandling of funds or donor funds, and now, like, his time in the sun, it's not necessarily sunset, but he's very much, like, not at the same level and caliber, like, we're not getting this TED Talk from him anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's hard, I mean, just in general, and I remind myself for this for my well-being, and, like, I think about this for the Black women who listen and Black folks who listen to us, and just women in general or any marginalized community, like, something I've noticed, when I was writing during the height of Black Lives Matter and stuff, there just was this fervor for Black voices. There was this waxing and wane of desiring our perspective, and right now our perspective is seen as polarizing, and, like, I see that change and how much people wanna engage with Black people, and, like, it does sometimes feel like we're at the whims of white people's guilt or white people's desire to engage or not engage with us, and that can be frustrating, but I remind myself that to say, like, even if, like I wanna mostly say this to the Black entrepreneurs like yourself and myself who are listening and putting out content, like, I don't want folks to get discouraged when, like, all of a sudden people love your work and then they don't, like, it's really more about where we are in our social cultural moment, and I find when it comes to Black voices, sometimes we're loved and adored, and our perspective is seen as necessary, and sometimes our perspective is seen as inherently political or polarizing or problematic. I mean, all identity is political. The personal is political. Shout out to Angela Davis. So we have to acknowledge that. But I just think I try to remind myself that like, the world is so fickle in how it feels about Blackness and Black voices and Black contributions, but as long as we can maintain that perspective on ourselves, that our voices are worthwhile and our contributions are worthwhile is so important. And I wanna say, like, with my video and what I always want folks to know about my content and our work we do together is, like, we're not really espousing right or wrong, but really figuring out together, like, what does inclusion look like? What does belonging look like in this moment? Troubling some theories that are already there, challenging each other, and that's what I hope folks take away from this episode is like, we're all wrestling with this and like it's important work to wrestle together and to think through it all together.
Yeah, and one thing I love and appreciate about our friendship is we always are striving to make each other better and think bigger.
Yeah, yeah,
And I just really adore that about being
sure.
able to be in community with you, so thank you for that, it really truly is a gift.
Yes, of course.
And I wanna end with this quote from Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde says this, she says, "And when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard nor welcomed, but when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it's better to speak, remembering that we were never meant to survive."
That's stunning. I love that. I love that. That's beautiful.
Listen, Audre, maybe it's not Auntie Brene, it's Auntie Audrey.
Love it. I love it. I love it. And yes, usually we do end with sacred descent, but my challenge is for you all to think about, what does sacred descent look like for you when it comes to well-being at work? So, and we put this on the Patreon, you can answer in the comments, and even on Spotify, you can answer in the comments now too. So I hope we can hear from you around what that looks like. Thanks so much, Paul.
I'll talk to you next week.
Right there with you. Appreciate you. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps more people find this space of exploration and connection.
And if you want to go even deeper, support us on Patreon. Your membership helps us keep these conversations going and gives you exclusive access to great content.
Because this isn't just a podcast, it's a community. And no matter where you are on your journey,
we're right there with you.